Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of OTA on the Air. I am joined today by Richard Crockett, who is the president and CEO of the Capital Transportation Academy. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hey, Nick, thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to be here to share with you guys some real, solid information about the industry and what's going on with in the CDL world.
Oh, fantastic. So let's kick this off and learn a little bit more about you. So tell me about Capital Transportation Academy, your background, and how you got started in this business.
Well, Nick, I am a graduate of the Ohio State University. And the owner of Capital Transportation. My background is in finance and business. I graduated from OSU and then went into banking and was a banker and commercial lender for many years, and decided to go into business for myself and acquired an existing transportation company that was mainly engaged in school busing. And then a few years ago, I divested of that business and formed Capital Transportation, which is the full service transportation company that provides ground transportation to the transportation sector, including regional transit authorities, airports, military bases, and then private companies and nonprofits. So we do ground transportation as well. That's another division of the Capital Transportation, the group, so to speak. And as I said before, we started the Capital Transportation Academy division about 10 years ago, when we recognized that, and I'd like to say that I was prophetic enough to know that there were going to be a huge driver shortage 10 years later in the CDL space, or trucking industry, but I wasn't. I realized, however, that in the school bus business and the ground transportation business, there was certainly a shortage of drivers even 10 years ago in terms of getting good qualified CDL drivers that met all the requirements and qualifications of a good driver, so to speak. And so one of the things we decided to do as we kind of evaluated our future, and that was recognizing that there was a demand there. We did the research and actually met with a number of schools, owners and management. And I'd like to give a little shout out to Doris Young and her family up at Great Lakes, because they were a huge resource for us in getting started. And so I want to thank Doris and her family, and Roger Rollins and those guys. But anyway, we recognized that there was an opportunity in the CDL training space, and barriers for entry were pretty low because we had trained our own drivers and that kind of thing. And so long story short, 10 years later, we're here, and I've kind of gone through the ups and downs, including COVID, and are still here doing a great job, being deemed essential. We continue to train after a few weeks of shutdown to meet some of the health requirements and protocols that were put out by the CDC and the local health departments. And once we did that, met those social distancing, disinfecting, and those kind of mask wearing, we continued to train through the pandemic. And so certainly being deemed essential was a huge benefit to us, both as a business as well as producing good qualified students for the industry. And so here we are. And I want to talk a little bit about the fact that, and you may ask me in a little bit, but I'll get ahead of you. In knowing and having a relationship and a member of OTA, certainly we recognize that there was a need to try and address the driver shortage. And so we were engaged with Tom Balzer and OTA about, how we kind of address that. And we were privy to be part of a Senate hearing along with Tom and OTA about some of the funding necessary in order to provide CDL training. And so we kind of connected on that level, recognizing that there was some opportunity and synergies for us to work together. And certainly we've had those conversations, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you'll ask me.
Yeah. So let's get into that. So, first off, Richard, congratulations on, all the success that you've had with Capital Transportation, Academy, and seeing the need for that, and, having that entrepreneurial spirit and kind of diving, into that, and figuring out making it work and making it work through a pandemic. So, congrats to you on that. And, proud to have you as, an OTA member, and proud to have Great Lakes as an OTA member, and just, have that, participation. But yeah, no, obviously that you and Tom, I know our CEO, had that, same kind of vision and thought of like, wow, there's this real need. And so we recently, the Ohio Trucking Association launched the Ohio CDL Council. And you generously agreed to be our first chairman, as someone that has that, visionary capability and understanding the needs and how the kind of industry is going. So can you talk a little bit further about, why you think that we need a group like this in today's economy, and what's going on in the industry, and what made you so interested in, getting involved and taking on this leadership position?
Well, Nick, one of the things is recognizing that there was a huge need, and having some conversations with Tom about how and how we address that, and how is it that we both can play a role in addressing the driver shortage. And I certainly had some real ideas about it, just based on some conversations and programs that we had talked about amongst our management staff here at Capital Transportation in order to get more students in the school. One of the big issues was funding. And so that was kind of a really mutually agreeable topic that Tom and I had some synergy around, in terms of how do we address funding and so forth. As a matter of fact, that was what the Senate hearing testimony was about a couple years ago, with respect to state funding that had been taken away. But we're hoping, and I think in the current budget, there is additional funding for CDL training in a program that's just been appropriated by the legislator and approved by the governor's recent budget for CDL training for the 21-22 budget cycle, or excuse me, what do they call it? Biennium, state biennium.
Yeah.
So at any rate, there will be some funding coming from the state down the pike. But anyway, we had some synergy and some real understanding that there needed to be something done to address it. I had previously chaired an organization called the Conference of Minorities in Transportation, which is a 40-chapter national organization that about 7 years ago, we started a chapter in Columbus that mainly dealt with businesses and professionals, minorities who are engaged in the transportation sector. And that organization was basically an advocacy group for that population of members. And so we grew that chapter from about 7 to 8 members to over 100 members in that 5-year period. And so I've certainly had some experience at that. So you have to excuse me, I'm not sure how this is working.
Oh, well, business
It
never
may have,
stops, Richard. I don't
I
worry
know,
about
man.
it.
I apologize for that, and I'll have to get my technical assistant to rectify that so it doesn't happen again. But at any rate, we formed a very successful chapter of an organization called Compto. So I
Hmm.
had some experience in growing organizations like Tom and I were talking about, and certainly with the real interest in trying to get more CDL students in our school and more CDL drivers trained for the industry. Certainly this was a great idea in terms of how we accomplished that. So I wanted to bring that experience, both from a business standpoint as well as kind of a nonprofit organization standpoint, in forming and developing that organization and how we grow that. And so I had that experience, and wanted to share that with OTA.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you brought up the, definitely the driver shortage and the funding issue. What are some of the other big issues facing, you know, the Ohio CDL Council and kind of schools and examiners, right now. And, what should, obviously OTA, the majority of OTA members are carrier companies, what should they be concerned about and focused on this policy front? And why should, they care about what's going on with the CDL schools?
Well, first of all, I think the reality is, and I think everybody around the country, both trucking industry people and layperson industry individuals as well, understand the impact that trucking has on the economy
Mm-hmm.
and supply chain. And when you really look at what's going on around the country, it is apparently, it's apparent and very obvious that the trucking industry is suffering from a driver shortage. And everybody I talk to basically understands the impact that trucking is having on our economy. With that having been said, one of the things that's important is there'll be some changes in federal legislation coming down the pike that's going to impact, called the entry-level CDL training program. That's going to be initiated in February of 2022, and it's going to change how we train drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to, and I can get into the entry-level driver training program as a separate segment of this interview,
Mm-hmm.
but it will change the way in which we train drivers, and even trucking companies will no longer be able to train their drivers in the historical way that they have. There'll be a clearinghouse created by the FMCSA, which is the government governing entity that controls trucking nationally on a federal level. And there'll be a clearinghouse, and every school and trucking company will have to set up their training program in accordance with their guidelines. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of trucking companies now will basically have to create schools internally, or at least training programs that meet that program's minimum requirements. And that's going to be significant in terms of how it impacts bringing new drivers in. And so recognizing that, that's another piece that I wanted to make sure that not only the driving schools were familiar with when it comes time to transition into the entry-level driver training program mandated by the feds, but I also wanted the trucking industry to be aware of it and how it's going to change their training programs internally. And so it was a great opportunity to kind of bring both of those pieces together, because they're going to need each other even more going forward, because trucking companies will either need to set up their own entities internally to meet those requirements, or they're going to have to partner with schools in order to produce and train their trainees or new employees, or work with the schools to recruit their students. That's going to be even more important in the future in terms of making sure that trucking companies and schools have kind of a symbiotic relationship, so that it could produce drivers and doesn't even create a greater shortage if the two don't work together. And so that's why one of the reasons why I think both entities, both the CDL schools as well as the trucking industry, ought to be extremely familiar with this requirement and program that's going to be implemented, because no driver, student driver, can get their CDL license until their information has been submitted through this clearinghouse.
Mm-hmm.
And their information has to be from a certified or registered school with the
Mm-hmm.
clearinghouse. And once that information, the training records have been submitted, then they'll get a number that will then be given to the local BMV. And then that number allows them to be issued an opportunity, or given an opportunity to take the CDL test. And then once that test has been passed and they get their CDL, then that CDL number will be registered with the clearinghouse from FMCSA. And so that kind of closes the circle in terms of how new drivers will be trained and then available for the market to be able to recruit and become
Yeah.
employed.
Well, Richard, I think you've already kind of gotten the point across, but since, hey, I'm the VP of membership here, I have to, ask the question and really bring it to a head. So what would you say to a CDL school or examiner or a carrier member who wants to get involved in this that doesn't see the value in getting involved in Ohio CDL Council or an organization like OTA?
Well, one of the things is it provides a number of things that don't exist. Well, I don't want to say don't exist, but could enhance um, the interest of CDL schools, and that is advocacy.
Hmm.
As we mentioned before, Tom and I met on a number of occasions at the State House talking about legislation that impacted OTA, but also in this particular case, it impacted the school funding or state funding impacted CDL schools because it meant less resources available to CDL schools to be able to recruit and then subsequently fund students to come to their schools. So certainly advocacy on those kinds of things has proved to be beneficial because Tom, through some of the advocacy with OTA, was able to get the school funding for students reinstated in the current state budget. So certainly it's already shown that there is some benefit to being a part of OTA because OTA and Tom Balzer was intimately involved in that discussion and negotiation with both the State House as well as the Senate Finance Committee to make sure that that was reinstated. So that's from a CDL standpoint, CDL school standpoint, that was one of the big benefits is advocacy. The other thing is through education. Certainly information that we will be getting through OTA and through the council as it relates to the entry-level driver training program, which we will be intimately involved with. And I will make that a priority of the council to get information and make sure that information flow and exchange not only between OTA and its members, but excuse me, not only between the CDL Council and its members, but also OTA and the members of the members at large are familiar with the entry-level driver training, which I think that educational component will certainly benefit the entire industry because information about the changes that are going to occur are going to be vital to the success of both the trucking industry as well as the CDL schools.
Yeah. So taking a step back here, I mean,
One other thing I think will be important is education and education and advocacy. And then the other thing is how do the two entities come together to really focus on in a very deliberate and systematic way an exchange of ideas about how CDL schools can better prepare drivers to be ready to go when they are employed and recruited by OTA members or the trucking industry. Certainly that dialogue doesn't exist right now. And so through council, and that's another means of education and communication as to how the CDL schools and the council can better prepare drivers to enter the industry. And then at the same time, also, the council can communicate to its schools what is it that OTA members are looking for in drivers that come to them initially from schools. How can they be better prepared? And we can, as a school, a collective of schools, really understand better what the trucking industries will be requiring in the future. With various changes that are going to be happening down the pike in the industry itself. And how can we, as schools, be better educated to educate our students to become part of that trucking industry? So those are just some of the things that I think would be helpful.
yeah. So let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk about your role, not with the Ohio CDL Council, but as your role as president and CEO of Capital Transportation Academy. How can carriers do a better job at recruiting some of your graduates, and what do they wish that they knew about what the CDL schools do and how they prepare drivers and such. Because obviously you talk about what things that the Ohio CDL Council wants to do is enhance that communication. So I'd just be interested to hear what your general thoughts are based upon your over 10 years of doing this.
Well, first of all, I think the trucking industry, some of the trucking industry, I won't generalize, but many in recruiters and companies, when they do hire new individuals, um, may have kind of a misconception of that entry level driver, for example.
Hmm.
What happens with the entry level driver is we are training at the schools generally to prepare students to pass the CDL test. And so therefore, what happens is those drivers are have to be prepared to pass all aspects of the driver training test, the pre-trip, the backing maneuvers, as well as on the road training. And so what we're basically trying to do is to prepare that student for that examination to receive their CDL. That is like fundamentally one of the things, and we do it in the safest possible way with the limited amount of time that we have, which is a total of 4 weeks to
Hmm.
work with that student. And so we can't make great experienced drivers of students in 4 weeks.
Hmm.
To be an experienced in what the industry might call, an excellent driver, it obviously takes years for that in order to get that experience on the road. Those students aren't coming with that.
Hmm.
And so I think when students come out and aren't quite the expert, so to speak, that an individual who's got 2 to 3 years of experience, I think most schools who don't have training programs need to understand that there's a certain amount of training that needs to take place for that new student before they are probably at the top of your driver pool.
Hmm.
And so just making sure that they are understanding and sensitive to that. The other thing is when we work with a number of trucking companies that frequently recruit our schools, they can make suggestions and recommendations in our training program that we might implement that might be able to help that driver become a better driver
Hmm.
based on some of the things that they require of drivers. And we can spend a little bit of time with that with all of our students, kind of preparing them for some of the I would say general things that are required from trucking company to trucking company that we could certainly spend a little bit more time on preparing that student. But certainly, frequent recruiting, us getting familiar with the companies that come to our school and some of the things that they are looking for, certainly we can implement in our training. Um, so basically, that I think is some of the benefits that could take place. I think the other thing is for trucking companies, we certainly encourage you to be a part of um, the training, coming in and being frequent recruiters, because certainly we like to establish kind of a partnership between our school and the trucking companies that recruit us, so
Hmm.
that individuals can know before they leave our school, they will have a tremendous opportunity for employment prior to their graduation. And I can say 75% of the students that leave our school leave already with some form of pre-hire from one of your members or one of the trucking companies in Central Ohio. So certainly that is a huge benefit, if you
Hmm.
will, because we can market that we are recruited by some of the top training trucking companies in the country. And so that's certainly a marketing and selling point for Capital Transportation.
Yeah. So what do you have going on at Capital Transportation Academy coming up? Are there any new initiatives or anything that you're working on that that you want to make the followers of OTA and they are aware of?
Well, we have a kind of a pilot program that we're introducing. It's called Roads to Work. And Roads to Work is a program where we are looking at individuals who are maybe unemployed, need retrained because they've been laid off, or individuals who are just in need of a job
Mm-hmm.
and are trying to change career or navigate their career situation. And so we're working with government agencies and private companies to fund kind of a nonprofit component of our structure, of our capital transportation structure, called Roads to Work. And that entity will be working with those government organizations, if you will, and agencies to secure funding to be able to assist individuals with payment or funding for their CDL. And then what we typically will do is work with that organization through um, what we call a job skills training program, or a working with them to kind of reestablish some of the work ethic,
Mm-hmm.
because many of these individuals have been laid off or
Right.
unemployed. We've got some that are returning from incarceration. So there's a job skills or work skills component, what they call soft skills component, where we work with these individuals to kind of job coach them up for a week prior to their entry into our program. And then we will then train them
Mm-hmm.
and then move them along through the CDL program, and then subsequently get these individuals employed. And these are individuals that are typically underserved individuals. And
Mm-hmm.
so certainly the broader, the larger, if you will, the pool of drivers or potential drivers, the better for the industry in terms of providing some of non-traditional sources of populations to be able to help address the driver shortage. And that's a pilot program that we're currently operating in Columbus. And certainly it's something that we'll be working with not only the schools, but also nonprofits
Mm-hmm.
around the state. And ultimately we may kind of implement the program on a much more regional, national basis. But that's kind of something that we're working with. And I'll be talking with Tom a lot more about the Roads to Work program, which
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned, but certainly something that would be hugely impactful because 90% of the individuals that have gone through our pilot program have
Mm-hmm.
graduated. 80% of them have gone on to be employed within 60 days of graduation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been hugely successful. And certainly it's something that Capital Transportation is initiating here in Columbus that we hope to bring to your community real soon. So
Yeah, well, that's fantastic, Richard, and some of the same entrepreneurial thinking that got you started in this industry in the first place of trying to address a need that you see in the world. And we're very thankful that we do have you in the industry and been such a great partner to OTA and working with us on this new venture of the Ohio CDL Council. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today for this OTA on the air edition. I look forward to working with you in the future and hopefully bring you back and give updates about what's going on with the Ohio CDL Council, and you can give updates on what's going on with that new program, and we'll kind of go to there. But I really appreciate your time today, and hope you do well. And as we move into this fall, and also make one more plug. Hopefully, we're going to see you in September 13th and 14th for our OTA annual conference. For those of you watching, still time to sign up. Just visit our website, and we'd love to see you there.
well, listen, I want to first of all thank you for this opportunity, as well as Tom Balzer for not only having confidence that I certainly could work with you guys in making the CDL Council a success. Certainly, I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the board of directors there at OTA as the chair of the council. And certainly, I just want to, again, thank you guys for this opportunity to kind of convey my thoughts, ideas on how we can help the industry really address this very serious problem of driver shortage. And so certainly, hopefully, something today I've said might spark some interest. And I want to encourage all the schools, as well as many of your members who can be part of this as well, to join us on the council and hopefully make it a huge success.